Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I really enjoyed this lineup, so I hope you all enjoy them as well. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes on this one. Dropping a like helps ensure more people see the content, but it does also just let me know I'm doing a good job. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post content just like this all of the time. I have almost 800 of these videos across the channel, so if you're at all interested, please be sure to subscribe, check out my other videos. There is endless content for you to listen to. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the horror stories with no mid-roll ads right after the ad break after this intro. There won't be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Children ask a lot of questions, but they're never the right ones. For example, when I was a kid, I never asked my parents why we had to live in the middle of the woods. I never asked why our neighbors lived so far away, or why none of them had children. And I never asked why we had to turn off all the lights before sundown. I never suspected something was off because my parents were smart about it. They treated the lights rule like it was normal. So I did too. They even made a game out of it. Every sundown, the three of us would race around the house, scrambling to see who could turn off the most light switches. What could have been a traumatic memory was transformed into whimsical fun. But you can only cheat the inevitable so many times. One night, Dad was working late. Mom lost track of time for some reason, and I was distracted by my bionicles. The setting sun didn't cross my mind until Dad burst through the front door in a panic. I looked up, startled by the sudden entrance, and saw the sky behind him was pitch dark. "Honey, turn off the lights," Dad barked as he dashed to the nearest light switch. My parents scrambled the house in a panic, but I stayed calm. Thinking about it now, their urgency should have frightened me, but I was naive and invested in my game, so I continued playing until the house went completely dark. Reluctantly accepting that it was time for bed, I gathered up my Lego warriors and put them where they wouldn't get stepped on. Once all of them were safely accounted for, I looked out a nearby window and noticed twin lights staring out of the trees. At first, I was scared, but as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I realized it was just some critter out for an evening stroll. I knew that animals roamed the woods at night, but I'd never seen one get that close to the house before. Overcome by childish excitement, I waved hello to it. It waved back. "Carson?" Dad hissed, doing his best to stay quiet. "Where you at, bud?" "Shh," I whispered back. "You'll scare it off." "What?" Dad bolted into the room, his footsteps a clumsy contrast to the stillness of the night. I looked away from the window to shush him. When I turned back, the thing was gone. "Never mind, Dad," I said with a shrug. "It ran away." Dad sighed in relief and picked me up. I felt his heartbeat thunder in his chest as he checked to make sure the window was shut. "Don't worry about it," he whispered in a strained voice. "Come on, let's get to bed." Mom and Dad had me sleep with them for some reason, but otherwise the rest of the night was completely normal. There was no cataclysm, no punishment for breaking the rules, no ominous sense of dread lingering over the house. Life continued on normally, unaffected by the night's mistake. My parents were nervous at first, but laughed it off after a week or two. They never suspected something was off because Mr. Pallywag was smart about it. I still remember the day Mr. Pallywag introduced himself. Mom had left me to my own devices again, so I went out to the backyard and invented some game to keep myself occupied. Whatever I'd come up with must have been good, because I was so absorbed in what I was doing. It took me a while to realize someone was watching me. For a while I pretended it was my imagination, but when I couldn't ignore the feeling of eyes peering out from the woods any longer, I stopped and scowled at the trees. "Quit being weird," I shouted, my courage bolstered by youthful ignorance. "Come on out." In response to my demands, a large bipedal creature shuffled out from the tree line. It was covered in a shaggy coat of gray fur, and its small dark eyes reminded me of a great white shark's. It would have been frightening, if not for the pork pie hat, lightly perched on top of its head. Between the hat and its spotless white gloves, it looked more like a cartoon character come to life than an animal. "Hello," the creature said with a shy, friendly wave. "Do you live here?" "Uh-huh." "Oh, good. I'm your neighbor, Mr. Pallywag. Sorry it took so long for me to introduce myself. What's your name?" "Carson." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Carson. Are your parents home?" "Mom is, so you should stay back. She doesn't like it when animals get too close to the house." Mr. Pallywag frowned, which made him look even more cartoonish. I couldn't help laughing at his expression. "I don't see what's so funny," Mr. Pallywag huffed. "I'm not an animal. I'm a respectable citizen." "I'm sorry. You made a funny face, that's all." "Oh, that's not a funny face. This is." Mr. Pallywag stuck out his tongue and bulged his eyes. It looked so goofy I nearly passed out from laughter. I laughed so loudly, Mom popped her head out of the window and asked me, "What's so funny, Carson?" Mr. Pallywag made a funny face. "Mr. Pallywag?" "Yeah, don't you see him?" Mom scanned the trees, a frown firmly etched on her face. I looked behind me to find that Mr. Pallywag had disappeared. "That's weird," I said. "He was right here." "Honey, who's Mr. Pallywag?" "He's a big, furry monster wearing a hat. You can't miss him." "Oh," Mom sighed, relieved. "He's imaginary, then." Part of me wanted to argue, but I stayed quiet. If Mom didn't want me to believe Mr. Pallywag was real, that was her choice. Nothing worth arguing over. Besides, adults always hated being wrong. An argument could only end with me getting dragged inside. "Well, I'll leave you boys to it. Have fun, okay?" "Okay." Mom went back to whatever she was doing. Once he was sure she wouldn't come back, Mr. Pallywag popped out from behind a tree and grinned at me. "Sorry I called you a monster," I said quickly. "But you got mad when I said animals, so..." "That's all right, Carson. I understand. But I won't forgive you unless you do something for me." "What's that?" "Play a game with me," Mr. Pallywag cried, dramatically flourishing his hat. "Okay." And just like that, I made a friend. Mr. Pallywag came to visit me as much as he could. Sometimes he'd go missing for days or even weeks. But I didn't mind. He always made up for it with a fantastic new story about his travels. I always liked stories, but my parents rarely told me any. Most nights it was too dark to read anything, and they were too busy during the day. Luckily, telling stories was Mr. Pallywag's favorite pastime, and I was happy to listen. Some nights when I had trouble falling asleep, I would even crack the window open so Mr. Pallywag could continue telling me about his adventures. He was always happy to do it, but he never came into my home. I asked him why once, but he just shook his head and said my parents wouldn't like it. That makes sense to me now, but at the time I thought it was silly. Mom didn't mind Mr. Pallywag at all. Dad did at first, but then one night, he and Mom had a fight about it. It got really intense until Mom said it was perfectly normal for a kid with no friends to make one up. That made Dad go quiet. He didn't say anything about Mr. Pallywag again. I can't blame my parents for thinking Mr. Pallywag was imaginary. He was very good at hiding. In fact, he was so good that, at first, I tried to make a game out of catching him. "Look, Mommy," I'd squeal with delight. "He's behind the swing set. No, no, now he's behind the sandbox. But eventually, I let him hide without calling attention to it. He was quiet as the wind and quick as a fox, and nobody could find him if he didn't want to be found. I also got the feeling something bad would happen if my parents caught him. I didn't want that. He was my best friend. Most of the time, Mr. Pallywag was content to play in my backyard, but he asked me to come into the woods with him twice. The first time happened because Mom yelled at me. Before I tell this part, I want to make it clear that Mom was not abusive. That said, she wasn't exactly Mother of the Year either. There were mitigating circumstances, granted. She didn't have a lot of friends, and we didn't leave the house much because of our isolation. Most days she was either alone or only had me for company. If that doesn't sound so bad, imagine being trapped in a remote cabin and the only person you can have a conversation with refuses to talk about anything that isn't related to cartoons, or how hungry they are. Frankly, it's a miracle she didn't kill me. I was usually content to entertain myself, but one day, for whatever reason, all I wanted to do was spend time with her. "Mom, come play with me," I whined. "Not right now, honey," she said, doing her best to keep her voice calm. "Why don't you watch a movie?" "I don't wanna." "Well, how about you play your PlayStation?" "No, I want to play a real-life game." "Okay, well, why don't you ask Mr. Pallywag to play with you?" "I don't want to play with Mr. Pallywag. I want to play with you." "Carson, I want to play." My tantrum raged on like that for a while. Mom tried to soothe me, but I refused to be sated. Finally, she snapped and shouted, "Enough." The force of the shout shut me up immediately. "I can't play with you right now, Carson. I need some time to myself, okay? Just shut up and go outside." With that, Mom stormed to her bedroom and slammed the door shut. Tears welled up in my eyes as I scurried outside. It was my first rejection. I remember it better than my first kiss. For what felt like hours, I sat on my swing set and bawled. If Mom noticed, she didn't come out to comfort me. Odds are she was just holed up in the house somewhere, but at the time it felt like she was actively ignoring me. "Hey, Carson!" Mr. Pallywag's sudden appearance didn't surprise me. He made a habit of showing up out of nowhere. Normally I pretended to be surprised, but I was so depressed I couldn't summon the energy for it. "Carson?" Mr. Pallywag asked. "You okay?" "Mom yelled at me," I choked out between sniffles. "Oh no, come here, bud. It's okay." Mr. Pallywag opened his arms and wrapped me in a big hug. I always liked Mr. Pallywag's hugs. It was like hugging a big warm pillow. There was something else about them too. Something that made you feel safe and protected. Kind of like falling asleep. "Tell you what," Mr. Pallywag said when I calmed down enough. "How about we do something special today?" "Special?" "Yeah, I'm going to show you the best spot in the entire forest." "I don't know. Mom and Dad said I can't go into the woods because it's dangerous." "That's not true," Mr. Pallywag replied as he patted my head. "They said you can't go in the woods alone. You're not alone if I'm with you, right? Besides, they won't even know you are gone if we're quick enough." For a moment I hesitated. I was a good kid. I always followed the rules. But Mr. Pallywag had a point. If I was with him, I wouldn't be alone, and I wanted to get back at Mom somehow. I could bend the rules a little. Just once. "Okay," I said, "but we have to be quick." "Deal." Mr. Pallywag took my hand and we walked into the woods together. It was a beautiful day. Birds chirped sonatas above us, and sunlight slipped through the cracks in the tree branches to cast macabre shadows on the ground. I made a game out of jumping from sunspot to sunspot. Mr. Pallywag thought it looked like fun, so he joined in as well. The two of us got so wrapped up in the game I almost forgot how upset I'd been. Almost. Eventually, our route led us to a circular clearing. Mr. Pallywag strolled to the center of it and sat down with a great big sigh. I followed his lead and inspected my surroundings. The clearing felt peaceful, but there was something vaguely sad about it too. "This is my special spot, Carson," Mr. Pallywag said. "What do you think?" "I like it, but what makes it so special?" "Well, this is where most of my friends decide to come to the party." "Party? What party?" "Why, only the greatest, most fantabulous party ever. There's cake, balloons, and games galore. And there's plenty of music and dancing." "And stories?" "Of course," Mr. Pallywag laughed. "All the stories you could ever want." "That sounds nice," I said, trying to imagine it. "Are there other kids there?" "Oh yes, tons of kids." "Does everyone get along?" "Of course." "And nobody's left out?" "Nope." "Good." We sat in silence for a while. I didn't mind. Silences felt okay with Mr. Pallywag, not like when Dad got quiet. That was usually a sign he was about to start lecturing me about how I didn't clean my room enough, or that I was spending too much time on the television or something. It wasn't like when Mom got quiet either. When she got quiet, it was because she was mad and didn't want us to know. It didn't work, though. I always knew. Something in the trees caught my attention. It was slowly swinging back and forth like the pendulum in my grandma's old clock. I watched it for a while, back and forth, but couldn't figure out what it was. Part of me wanted to take a closer look, but Mr. Pallywag squeezed my shoulder before I had the chance. "Okay, Carson," he said. "It's time to go back now." "Oh, really? Can't we go to the party instead?" Mr. Pallywag grinned. For the first time, I noticed how large his teeth were. They weren't sharp fangs or anything. They were just large. I had a sudden urge to run away, but I ignored it. "One day," Mr. Pallywag said, taking my hand. "But not just yet." "Why not?" "You're not sad enough." I wasn't sure what Mr. Pallywag meant, but I let him lead me away from the clearing without complaint. As we entered the woods, I glanced over my shoulder, hoping to get one last look at whatever was swaying back there. No luck. It was too well hidden by the foliage. "Let's race," Mr. Pallywag said. "Last one there's a grounded swallow." Mr. Pallywag let go of my hand and sprinted into the woods. I ran after him, the swinging object forgotten. When we got back, he stopped me and knelt down to my eye level. "One quick thing before you go," Mr. Pallywag whispered. "Promise you won't tell your parents about my special place, okay?" "Why not?" "Well, it's not very special if everyone knows about it, right?" It made sense, but there was an icky feeling in my gut as I nodded and swore to keep it a secret. "Thanks, Carson. I'll see you later, okay?" I smiled and nodded again. Mr. Pallywag grinned and gave me a big hug goodbye. I hugged him back and walked into the house. When I ambled into the kitchen, I found Mom crying at the kitchen table. "Mom?" "Carson!" Mom wailed. "Where were you?" She didn't let me answer before she scrambled over and wrapped me in a bone-crushing hug. "I'm fine, Mommy," I said, shocked. "I just went into the woods with Mr. Pallywag." "Carson, what have I told you about going into the woods alone?" "But I wasn't alone. Mr. Pallywag was." "Mr. Pallywag doesn't count. You're not allowed to leave the backyard unless you're with me or Daddy. Do you understand?" "But..." "No buts. Honestly, what were you thinking?" "It was Mr. Pallywag's idea. He said..." "I don't care what he said. I was worried sick about you." I thought about protesting more, but I didn't bother. There was no use fighting her. As promised, I didn't tell my parents about Mr. Pallywag's secret spot. I didn't tell them about the party either. Something in my gut said they wouldn't like it. At some point I went back to school, but the only thing I remember about it is getting bullied. I tried talking to the nicer kids about Mr. Pallywag once. They didn't care. I stopped trying. Thinking back on it, nobody in my family had many friends. I guess that's why we all loved Uncle Dan so much. Uncle Dan was born in that backwater town and never quite managed to escape, but he didn't let it get to him. My parents liked him, and I was thrilled whenever he came over. He was no Mr. Pallywag, mind, but he was the closest anyone got. Unlike most adults, Uncle Dan took time to make sure I was feeling okay. He was a great listener, too, no matter what the topic was. He'd patiently allow me to ramble about it until I'd exhausted myself. If it was something bad, he'd offer sympathy or advice. I was just talking about Power Rangers or my latest video game. He'd run his fingers through his thick red beard and let out a low whistle of amazement. "Wow," he said in a tone implying I'd solved world hunger. "That is really something, kiddo. Thanks for sharing." When most people said stuff like that, I knew they were only saying it to humor me. Uncle Dan was special because I believed him. One time I asked Uncle Dan why he liked talking to me so much. He got real serious and said it reminded him of spending time with his daughter. I asked if I could meet her sometime. He got real quiet and shook his head. I didn't ask about her again. For some reason, the one thing I didn't tell Uncle Dan about was Mr. Pallywag. In fact, he might never have known if I hadn't shown him my drawing. It was just a crayon scribble of Mr. Pallywag waving hello, but I'd gotten the hat just right, and I was proud of my work. Obviously, the next time Uncle Dan came over, I made it a priority to show him my masterpiece. Uncle Dan, look at what I drew," I chirped as I shoved the drawing at him. "Carson," Dad scolded, smiling despite himself. "Give him a second to breathe." "That's all right, Keith," Uncle Dan chuckled. "Let's see what Picasso whipped up for us." Uncle Dan ruffled my hair and took the drawing. The second he saw what it was, his smile faded. I waited for him to say something, suddenly self-conscious. He was quiet for so long, I looked to Dad for reassurance. He looked just as confused as I was. "Uncle Dan?" I asked. It's great, Carson," Uncle Dan replied, his hands and voice shaking. "Great job. What's the fella's name?" "Mr. Pallywag." Uncle Dan's face went pale. "That's fun," he said in a low, emotionless voice. "Carson, would you excuse us for a moment? There's something I need to talk to your dad about." Okay." Unnerved, I left the room. I'd never seen an adult act like that before. I knew I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but I was so worried about Uncle Dan I stopped by the doorway to listen in. "Jesus, Dan, what's wrong? You look pale." "How long has Carson been talking about this thing?" "I'm sorry?" "Mr. Pallywag, how long?" "Oh, right. Couple of months, I think." "Months?" Uncle Dan yelled. "Yeah, the kid's got an imaginary friend. So what?" "Have you been leaving the lights on?" "No, of course not." "Well, okay, we did once, but that was..." Mom must have walked in because I heard her ask, "What's going... Dan, are you alright?" "You have to move," Uncle Dan insisted. "Now." "Move? I don't..." "We're not moving," Dad snapped. "Don't give me that tough guy crap, Keith. Christ, I should have figured this would happen." "Excuse me? What gives you the right to..." "Shut up and listen. Jenny drew that thing too. Right before... The house went deathly quiet. I could just barely hear Uncle Dan quietly sobbing. It made me uncomfortable, so I slunk off to my room. I didn't come out until Mom called me for dinner. As I sat down at the table, I looked over to Uncle Dan. It was like nothing had happened. He even shot me a cheerful thumbs up. "Sorry for the scare, kiddo," he said. "I remembered something really important. Boring grown-up stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." I nodded and pretended everything was fine. Uncle Dan was doing a good job acting normal, but my parents couldn't keep up the facade. Little things gave them away. They'd laugh a little too long at Uncle Dan's jokes, or they'd shoot me worried glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The second Uncle Dan left, my folks turned out the lights. "Carson, why don't you go get ready for bed?" Mom asked. "But it isn't even dark yet." "I know, but your dad wants to read you a story." "Really?" "Yes, really." I dashed to the bathroom and got ready for bed in record time. When I was done, I jumped into bed and Dad walked in with a beat-up old book. "Hey, bud," Dad said in a soft voice. "All set?" I nodded, too excited to speak. "Good. I've been saving this one until you were old enough. It's called Alice's Adventures in Wonderland." With great care, Dad gingerly flipped to the first chapter and began to read. I fell in love with it immediately. After finishing the chapter about poor old Bill the Lizard, Dad shut the book and smiled at me. "Well, liking it so far?" "Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Mr. Pallywig's stories." The corner of Dad's mouth flickered. "Oh yeah?" he asked. "Yeah, you do the voices better though." "Well, glad I've got that going for me." Suddenly Dad sniffed and wrapped me in a gigantic hug. That startled me. Dad wasn't opposed to hugging, but he rarely initiated. "Carson, you know Mom and I love you very much, right?" "Uh-huh." "And that we only want what's best for you, right?" "Uh-huh." "Okay, good." I hugged him back and we sat there for a while in uncomfortable silence. It might have been my imagination, but I swear I felt a tear drop onto the back of my neck. After what felt like forever, Dad sighed, let me go, and gently punched my shoulder. "Good night, kiddo," Dad said softly. "Love you." "Love you too, Dad." Dad smiled, turned out the light, and shut the door. I sat in bed and watched the sunset. I had a feeling something significant had happened, but I was too young to understand what it was. My parents were different after that night. Dad used to be content to spend weekends at home, but suddenly he wanted to spend every free moment away from the house. The nearest thing to do was an hour's drive away. But he didn't care. The longer the trip, the better. Mom changed too. She went from always wanting space to constantly occupying mine. If I was playing video games, she'd read her book on the couch nearby. If I was making something with my Lego sets, she would develop a keen interest in the construction effort. If I vaguely stated I was interested in something, she'd help me become the world's best expert in it. Because of my parents' sudden interest in my affairs, I didn't see Mr. Pallywig for weeks. They never officially told me to stop talking about him, but I could tell they didn't like him anymore. Whenever I mentioned wanting to play in the backyard, they always found some excuse to keep me inside the house. Then one night, my parents sat me down to talk. Neither bothered hiding the relieved expressions on their faces. "Great news, buddy," Dad said. "I got a new job. We're going to be moving soon." "Really?" "Yep, we're going to the city, far away from these boring old woods." "What about Mr. Pallywig?" "Well, Mr. Pallywig is staying here," Mom replied, shooting my dad an unreadable glance. "What? Why can't he come with us?" "He just can't," Dad said forcefully. "I mean, the forest is his home, right? It wouldn't be fair to make him move out too. If he can't come, I don't want to leave." "Carson, no." Despite my parents' best efforts, I bawled for hours. No matter what they tried, I refused to be comforted. I loved my parents and Uncle Dan, sure, but they were family. Mr. Pallywag was my only friend. I was inconsolable until I remembered Mr. Pallywag's party. Somehow my childish logic determined that the party was the solution to all my problems. If I could just figure out how to get there, everything would be all right. I wouldn't have to move. I wouldn't have to leave Mr. Pallywag behind. I wouldn't have to feel alone. My feelings about the move didn't deter my parents' plans. Within a week, they had all of our stuff packed and ready to go. I tried my hardest to see Mr. Pallywag, but Mom and Dad refused to leave my side. It was looking like I'd never get to go to that party. Then, when I'd finally given up hope, I stumbled into my opening. The day before the move, Dad was trying yet again to sell me on our new home. "You're going to love it, bud," he said. "There are a lot of other kids in the neighborhood." I didn't reply. The phone rang. Dad ignored it. I faintly heard Mom answer it in the other room. "I bet you'll make a ton of new friends," he said. "No, I won't. They'll be mean to me." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." "Honey?" Mom called. "It's the mill. Something about paperwork?" Dad swore under his breath and dashed out of the room. I stayed behind and scanned the room bored. That's when I saw the unguarded back door. I knew I wouldn't get another chance. I crept to the door and opened it as quietly as I could. After making sure my parents weren't coming, I scanned the trees for any signs of life. "Mr. Pallywag?" I whispered. "Mr. Pallywag, are you there?" "Shh, over here. Carson, quick." Without thinking, I bolted into the woods. I didn't get far before something strong and furry yanked me behind a tree. It put a hand over my mouth and shushed me. "Carson!" I heard Dad call. "Carson? Where'd you get to?" "Stay quiet, okay?" Mr. Pallywag whispered in my ear. "Carson, this isn't funny. Carson!" Mr. Pallywag placed me on his back, dropped to all fours and dashed into the woods. I gasped and held on tightly to his neck. I'd never seen Mr. Pallywag run that fast before. It was exhilarating. I would have enjoyed it more if Dad hadn't sounded so distraught. This next part won't make sense unless I talk about Eli Miller. Bad timing. I know, but bear with me. I didn't know Eli very well. He was a teenager, and even if we were the same age, he wasn't the type of guy Mom would want me to hang out with. He was the resident, troubled kid. Graffiti, antagonizing the police, drinking, that kind of thing. Dad always shook his head whenever he came up. I think that was his way of saying he felt sorry for him. Even though I heard a lot of stories about Eli, I only saw him in person once. Mom had dragged me along on a shopping trip to our local Dollar General, and I wasn't overly thrilled about being there. Normally, Mom insisted that I stay close to her when she was shopping, but that day she said I could browse the books by myself as long as I didn't leave the aisle. I was thrilled. It was one of my first tastes of freedom, and I capitalized on it immediately. As I browsed through the scattered copies of Animorphs and Goosebumps, Eli strolled into the aisle without a care in the world. He whistled a tuneless song, picked a magazine off the shelf, and casually flipped through it. I was so low to the ground that he didn't notice me. Something about the way Eli flipped through the magazine made me stop and watch him with juvenile fascination. After a minute or two, Eli scanned the store. When he thought nobody was watching, he casually slipped the magazine into the inner pocket of his jacket. A perfect crime. That was when he caught me staring at him. He froze, his hand still clutching the stolen loot. I knew I should have called someone over, or told him off for stealing or something. Instead, I put a finger to my lips. Eli smirked, nodded at me, and walked away. He didn't get to the end of the aisle before he stopped and looked back at me. I kept my finger on my lips in silent assurance. A weird expression spread across his face. He rocked on the balls of his feet and kept glancing from me to the door. He was home free and he knew it. And yet... Eli shut his eyes and sighed. He removed the magazine from his pocket and put it back on the shelf. I cocked my head, confused. "Don't steal, kid," Eli whispered. I smiled at him and nodded. He shot me a wink and left the store. I never told anybody else about it, but that little encounter left a big impact on me. Weird as it sounds, Eli transformed into a sort of Robin Hood figure in my head, someone who understood right and wrong in a way stuffy adults don't. He was a living legend. A hero, maybe. That's why I was devastated when he killed himself. I never got the full story. From what I heard, the poor kid hung himself in the woods without leaving a note. It took a week for anyone to notice he'd gone missing. Took another 2 for somebody to find him. What hurt me most was the injustice of it. In all the stories I'd heard, dying alone in the woods was a fate reserved for villains. Eli deserved better. It wasn't fair. After Eli's death, I had a recurring nightmare. In it, I'd be walking alone in the woods. I could feel something watching me, but I couldn't see it because it was hidden by the trees. Eventually, I'd start running, but thick vines would lash around my throat and yank me off the forest floor. The vines would lift me off the ground by the neck. Higher, higher, and the higher I got, the harder it was to breathe. And I would choke and choke and choke until I finally woke up, panicking and screaming. I still have that nightmare sometimes. Mr. Pallywag didn't stop running until we reached his secret spot. I gave him a moment to catch his breath, then climbed off and wrapped him in a massive hug. "I missed you," I whispered. "I missed you too. I'm moving away tomorrow." "I know. I don't want to leave," I sniffled. "Can I go to the party instead?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, I don't know," Mr. Pallywag said with calculated indifference. "I'm sure you'd have much more fun living in your fancy new house in the city." "No, Mr. Pallywag, I don't want to move. I want to stay here with you." "More than anything?" I nodded. "More than anything in the whole wide world?" I nodded again and looked up to see Mr. Pallywag's expression. He was grinning, and there was a triumphant expression in his dark eyes. "Well, if you're absolutely sure," he said, "I guess I can arrange it, but there's a few things we have to do first." "Like what?" Mr. Pallywag pulled off his hat and rummaged around inside it. "Let me see. It's around here somewhere. Ah, there it is." With solemn dignity, Mr. Pallywag pulled a long, thick rope out of his hat. The rope kept going and going to the point where I laughed at how absurdly long it was. Mr. Pallywag laughed too, and ended the bit by dumping the rest onto the ground. Then, suddenly serious, he picked up one end of the rope and held it where I could see. "Watch carefully, Carson," he said. "You have to get this just right, or it won't work." I paid close attention as Mr. Pallywag slowly tied a knot with the rope. It wasn't very complicated. A couple simple moves, and he'd made a knot which left a big loop at the end. When he was done, Mr. Pallywag undid the knot and handed me the rope. "Easy, right? Now you try." Slowly I copied Mr. Pallywag's technique. My knot looked just like his when I was done. He took the rope and gave it a couple firm yanks. The knot held. "Great job, Carson. You're so smart. Now watch this." Mr. Pallywag held up the rope and snapped his fingers. To my amazement, the inside of the loop shimmered, blurred together, and rearranged into strange kaleidoscopic shapes. "Wow," I exclaimed. "Is that magic?" "Of course it is, Carson. Not only that, it's a portal that goes directly to the party. Here, have a look. Mr. Pallywag held out the rope and I leaned in closer to see. There was a large room on the other side of the portal. The room was brightly decorated and filled wall to wall with people. Most of them were kids. No sound came through the portal, but I could see people having animated conversations and laughing. What a party it was. It was everything I'd hoped it would be. There was cake and pizza and a ton of TVs with all my favorite movies and games on them. Everyone was having so much fun. I didn't see anyone who looked excluded or bullied or unwanted. It was like something out of a dream. A red-haired girl on the other side of the portal noticed me and enthusiastically waved hello. I waved back. The girl pointed me out to some of the other partygoers, and they all began beckoning me over. I couldn't hear them, but I could see their mouths moving as they shouted encouragement. For some reason, I couldn't stop staring at the girl. She looked vaguely familiar, but Mr. Pallywag yanked the rope away before I could figure out why. Now, Mr. Pallywag began, there are a few things we have to do before we can go to the party. Are you ready? Uh-huh. Great. First, you'll need your invitation. Mr. Pallywag cleared his throat, grinned a wide, toothy smile, and took a deep bow. Carson, on the most momentous of days, I hereby offer you an exclusive invitation to the greatest party there ever is, was, or will be, good for whenever, wherever, whatever, and forever. Do you accept? I giggled and said, yes. A soft wind blew through the trees. Something changed. Something subtle. A muffled static in the air. A slight shift to the left. A delay so tiny, no one would ever notice. The only word I can think of to describe it is magic settling in. Old and powerful magic mankind chose to leave behind. I didn't like it. Wonderful, Mr. Pallywag said, clapping his hands. Just 2 more steps and you can go to the party. The first one's easy. All you have to do is pick a tree. I nodded and began inspecting the nearby trees in turn. Midway through my search, something in the forest stole my attention. I squinted and leaned towards it to get a better look. It was a yellow strip of police tape. The strip blew gently in the breeze, tracing lazy shapes in the air. It marked the spot where I'd seen the swinging thing last time. I frowned and turned back to Mr. Pallywag. He was still smiling, but there was something hard in his eyes. Something wrong, Carson? No. Good. Which tree did you pick? Despite a sudden sense of unease, I pointed at my tree. Mr. Pallywag walked me over to it and positioned me under one of the branches. The branch looked thick and sturdy. Good choice, Carson. Very good choice. Mr. Pallywag nodded in approval and showed me the portal again. The red-haired girl was there waiting for me. She shot me a huge, sincere smile and held up a slice of cake. It was my favorite. A corner piece of red velvet with tons of icing. The icing had even been lathered into a big letter C, just for me. Hey, Mr. Pallywag, I said, unable to contain my curiosity. Who's that girl? Oh, that's Jenny. She's a very good friend of mine. Do you two know each other? The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it. I shook my head. Well, you'll get to know each other soon enough. Just one last step, and you'll be at the party. What is it? It's very easy. Just put your head through the loop and close your eyes real tight. An intense, shaky feeling shot through my body. I took an involuntary step back. What's wrong? Mr. Pallywag asked. Everyone's waiting. See? His smile didn't waver as he pointed at the portal. All of the partygoers were gathered in a big crowd. They were clapping and chanting something. I couldn't hear them, but I knew it was my name. I instinctively scanned their faces. It didn't take me long to find the one I was looking for. When he caught me looking at him, he held a finger to his lips and winked. Eli. I felt the blood drain from my face as I backed away from the rope. Mr. Pallywag chuckled. "It's okay, Carson," he said, his voice as friendly as ever. "I won't lie, it's scary at first, but don't worry. When it's done, you get to stay at the party forever. Just you, me, and all of our friends. Doesn't that sound fun?" Mr. Pallywag's grin widened. I'd never realized how big he was before. About the size of a grizzly bear, maybe even bigger. I wanted to run, but I'd seen how fast he was. There was no way I'd be able to get away from him. I thought about the night Dad read me Alice, about the long hug he gave me, and the tear rolling down my cheek. With as much courage as I could muster, I shook my head. I don't want to go to the party anymore. Don't be silly, Carson. Everyone wants to go to the party. I don't. Carson? I shook my head again. Mr. Pallywag stopped smiling. Did you know I could see the future, Carson? He asked in a low growl. I saw yours the moment I met you. Want to know what I saw? No. It's so awful it makes me want to cry, he said, his mouth contorting into a massive frown. You're always a little bit different, a little bit off. People don't notice it at first, but they always find out. And when they do, they abandon you. Shut up, you're lying. No, I'm not, Mr. Pallywag droned, an annoyed teacher lecturing his student. You are going to end up all alone, Carson. No lovers, no friends. Eventually, you won't even have a family. No mommy or daddy or Uncle Dan. Nothing but a slow, depressing slide into endless misery. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Don't fight it, Carson. You already know I'm right. Something rustled in the woods. Dad's panicked voice echoed out soon after. Carson! Carson, where are you? The corner of Mr. Pallywag's mouth flickered. I started to yell, but Mr. Pallywag was on me in a flash. I closed my eyes and waited for the rope to close around my neck. To my surprise, Mr. Pallywag just clasped his hand over his mouth. When I opened my eyes, he was grinning at me again. You already accepted the invitation, he said. Just follow the steps when you change your mind. I nodded, too afraid to do anything else. Mr. Pallywag chuckled, uncovered my mouth, and walked away. Goodbye, Carson. See you soon. In the blink of an eye, Mr. Pallywag was gone. Dad burst out of the trees moments later. When he saw me, he nearly bowled me over and wrapped me in a hug so tight, I thought my spine would snap. Thank God, Dad kept whispering. Thank you, God. Thank you. I didn't say anything. Dad took me home. Mom held me close, and none of us ever discussed the incident again. We were too relieved to jinx the miracle. The move went as planned. I never went back to those woods again. I did my best to move on, tried to make friends, even attempted dating a few times. But so far, Mr. Pallywag's been right. Nobody stays. My parents are still alive, but we don't talk much anymore. Uncle Dan's dead. I talk to my coworkers a little, but I'm basically alone. Sometimes on really bad nights, I pull out some rope and tie that special knot. I let the loop shimmer, peek through the portal, and watch the party. More people join every year. Jenny and Eli are still there. They haven't aged a day. They look happy. Mr. Pallywag is there too, of course. He always knows when I'm watching. He stops what he's doing, looks me in the eye, and waves at me. I wave back. When he knows he has my full attention, he claps his hands and leads his guests in a mad dance. He whirls among them, hat in hand. dancing and singing and laughing. The party guests follow along, delirious with glee. I've tried to find a flaw with the party, an ulterior motive, or a sign that it's part of some sinister master plan. The problem is, it's perfect. Nobody disappears. Nobody's in pain. There's nothing there but fun and games and acceptance and love. Even though it's hard, I don't want to give up. I tell myself stories where I'm the hero, and no matter how dark it gets, I have to live. It's worked for a while, but every year gets harder, and deep down, I'm scared Mr. Pallywag was right. It's not if I go to the party, it's when. Last night when this woman came into the ER of Riverside General, I didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary. People show up bloody and incoherent all the time. But this woman, Emma, was different. She was wearing a green military jacket, the lining slashed to ribbons as if she'd attacked it with a kitchen knife. She'd fractured 3 ribs and gouged her arms raw. But the thing was still on her, clinging like it had been sewn into her skin. I've been a nurse for 14 years. I've seen addicts rip out IVs and men twice my size foam at the mouth. But what Emma said shook me to my core, and for the first time in my life, I believed evil might exist. Blood bubbled from between her teeth, and in a gruff voice that didn't sound like it belonged to her, she said, "James, Perry wants to know if Kathy's okay. Tell me she's okay." I'm getting ahead of myself here. I haven't slept in over 24 hours, so you can understand. Roughly a year ago, I was working the graveyard shift. It was 3:15 in the morning, and the doors of the ER flew open. A family of 4 was rushed in, all of them with gunshot wounds. 2 of the 4 family members were already DOA. An old man in his late 70s and a woman in her 40s. The old man was from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He had shot his whole family. One of the family members was still conscious, a man named Perry. We were trying to stop the bleeding when he gripped my arm and whispered, "Is Kathy okay? Tell me she's okay." Kathy was Perry's wife, and she was already gone. None of the family members lived. No one but me, Perry, and the other medical professionals in the room that morning know that he asked me that, and Perry died 30 seconds after I lied and told him she was going to make it. So when Emma asked me the same question, yeah, it chilled me to the bone. How could she have known? How did she even know my name? I haven't been able to shake it since. So once we got Emma sedated and placed her in restraints, I went to the waiting room to let her boyfriend, Ryan, know that Emma was stable. All he asked me was, "Is the jacket off?" It was, and I told him as much. We had put it in a hazardous waste bag, which is why it was so much weirder when I went back to her room, and the jacket was on the chair next to her. Its sleeve brushed my arm as I stepped closer, sticky with dried blood. I couldn't imagine any of the hospital staff would put a bloody jacket back in the room. It didn't make any sense. That's when I noticed Emma's eyes were open, like she was staring into my soul. "Tell me what happened to Kathy, James." Her voice gruff again. "How do you know about that?" I asked her. Her eyes closed and she fell back asleep. I moved through the halls asking anyone and everyone on staff who had put the jacket back in Emma's room, but no one seemed to know what I was talking about. It got to the point where I started getting strange looks. One of my colleagues asked if I was feeling okay. I wasn't. I'm still not. I went back to the room and the jacket was gone. So then I checked the storage room. The jacket back in the hazardous waste bag. I have no clue how it got there. I was afraid I was losing it. I was told to go home and get some rest. I didn't want to. I needed to figure out what the hell was going on, but I was basically forced to leave. I went back home. I had a couple drinks. Think I just needed to relax, but I stayed up all night with thoughts of Emma and Perry. I couldn't understand how they were connected. It was proof of an afterlife. I'd seen people die over and over, and now it felt like evidence that we didn't simply cease to exist. That maybe the people I loved, someone I'd lost, might not be gone forever. My mind infected. Which is why I decided to go to the house where Perry and his family were murdered. The house had sat vacant since the murders, which made it easy to slip in through the back. I used the butt of a flashlight and a rag to smash a small pane in the back door. When I first entered, I felt a shift. Even with the morning light sneaking through the windows, it was dark. My chest got tight. I told myself it was because I knew what had happened in this home. I walked through the living room. The floorboards creaked every other step. I was climbing the stairs to the second level when I suddenly smelled something metallic. It made my stomach twist. It was the scent of blood flooding my nostrils. Then Perry stumbled through the foyer below, bleeding profusely. In an instant he vanished, and then gunshots rang out. I sprinted up the stairs as quickly as I could, my hearing fuzzy. It felt like ice was rushing through my veins, and before I knew it, I had ducked inside a bedroom down the hallway. I'm not exactly sure how long I had been sitting in the darkened room when the closet door across from me slowly swung all the way open. It came to a stop when it bumped gently up against the wall. I could only see children's clothes hanging inside. A soft voice from inside the closet said, "Hey, come here." Then a child's pale arm protruded out from between the hanging clothes and waved me towards the closet. There was no way I was going over there. The child whispered again, "We need to hide. Grandpa's acting weird." I was terrified, both by what he said, but also the thought of moving toward the closet. I came to the house for answers, though, so I went over to the closet. I stopped right in front of it. I couldn't see past the clothes. They prevented me from seeing anything beyond them. I could either leave or wonder forever what I would find out. So I parted the hanging fabrics and crawled inside. I didn't see the boy. I looked behind me, to my left, right. "Hello?" I said quietly. He wasn't there. The hair stood up all over my body. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight, and the boy appeared out of thin air, covering the light with his hand. "No," he hissed. There I sat, face to face with a ghost. "When's my mom coming back? She said we would leave after dinner." His big eyes looking up at me, I realized he was scared. "Do you know a woman named Hannah?" I asked him. The look on his face shifted. His fear vanished, replaced by a strange recognition. "You know who I'm talking about, don't you?" He stayed silent. I could tell he knew something. "She was my wife." I can't tell you how badly I wanted him to say something, and I think he was about to. Then he heard furious footsteps pounding up the stairs from below, and I snapped back to being scared. "Shh." He cut me off with a harsh whisper. He backed himself further into the closet, hiding as best as he could. His bedroom door flung open and smacked into the wall. I could barely see out from behind the clothes, but I had a sliver of a vantage point and caught sight of someone walking in. "Joshua?" An old man's voice called out. I heard a rifle being cocked. I couldn't see him anymore, but I could hear his footsteps. It felt like forever, but must have only been a few seconds when he moved back into my line of sight. He turned slowly toward the closet. "Joshua, are you in there?" He walked over to us methodically. I could hear my heartbeat, thumping like a freight train. I looked to the little boy whose eyes were shut tight. I looked back out to the room and the old man was settled right in front of the closet. Something fell to the ground. It was dentures. The old man said something, but it was mumbled. He reached down and his hand was covered in blistered sores. He snatched up his dentures and popped them back into his mouth because I could understand what he said next. Close your eyes. I looked over to the boy. He was gone. When I turned back, the old man was standing right in front of me. The hanging clothes slid aside on their own, and the barrel of a rifle leveled with my face. It was a split second, but I swear he was wearing the same green jacket Emma had tried to slash off herself. Then just like that, he fired the gun. I saw the spark of the barrel and heard the crack of the chamber right before I closed my eyes tight. I felt something hot and sharp tear across my cheek. I was still screaming when I opened my eyes back up. The room was suddenly empty. The old man was gone. The silence was so complete it felt unreal. For a moment, I thought maybe it hadn't happened. Then I felt it, a warm trickle sliding down my face. I touched my cheek. My fingertips came away red. Blood. My blood. This was proof. Proof that something beyond our world existed, and that jacket has something to do with it. I left and I didn't drive home. I went back to the ER. I walked the halls to the storage room where I last saw the jacket, but the jacket was gone. The bag it was in, empty. It must have moved, I thought. It must have gone back to Emma's room. I walked in and she was asleep. My eyes scanned the room for the jacket. It wasn't anywhere to be seen. Emma's eyes snapped open. "Where am I?" she said. The look in her eye was different. She looked around the room, completely lost, innocent, and scared. Then all the lights in the ER went out. It was suddenly pitch black. The noise of panic began to swell into the room from outside. Then I smelled smoke. Cigar smoke. It was strong. So strong that I began coughing, choking on it. The red glow of a lit cigar appeared. Its embers shed just enough light for me to make out the face of the old man, where Emma had just been. The lights came back on and it was Emma again. The innocent look in her eyes. It was like she was looking into my soul. "Ryan has it," she said in that gruff voice. Then she said, "I can help you talk to Hannah again." I didn't even say anything. I couldn't. I was too tempted. I would have let her go. So here I am, sitting behind the steering wheel of my car in the ER parking lot. I don't know what to do next. Do I go inside and let Emma out? Should I go find Ryan? I don't know what to do. If you don't hear from me again, it means something awful has happened. And if that's the case, let the police know that James, the ER nurse from Riverside General, is probably dead. Or worse. The blizzard was supposed to last 2 days. Then 2 became 3. Then I was on day 4, holed up in my cabin. The only thing I could see outside was the snow, a white, shifting void that obscured the rest of the mountain range. I looked for the stars out of habit, but they were gone, buried behind layers of storm. The sky was black, thick with cloud and snow and the night. The tree line, usually clear, was faint now. A smudge of darkness barely separated nature from the cabin. The thick snow blurred the edges, turning trees into shadows that shifted with the wind. What had once been a sharp, familiar boundary was now lost in the white of the snow and darkness of the night. I was ready, at least. Before the storm hit, I'd driven down the mountain to the nearby town to stock up on supplies, like I always do. I filled my good old F-150 with food, water, and anything else I might need to ride out the worst of it. Back at the clearing off the cabin, I chopped firewood. I've already got enough stacked to last through a second ice age, but it gives me something to do, something to break up the quiet. All aspects of it, the rhythmic thunk of the axe hitting wood, the smell of fresh pine, the way the pile grows bigger with every swing. It all keeps me from thinking too much. I don't get visitors. That's not me being dramatic, it's just fact. The nearest neighbor is a 40-minute drive down the mountain, and that's when the roads are clear. Which they're not. Haven't been for days. That's why, when I heard a knock, I nearly dropped the mug of cocoa I was holding. It wasn't loud, just two slow, deliberate raps on the door. Then nothing. I stood there in the kitchen for a few seconds, just listening, waiting to hear it again. The storm was still going strong outside, but underneath the wind, the silence settled again like a blanket. Neither a knock nor a voice calling out followed. I figured I imagined it, cabin fever and all that. Wouldn't be the first time. But I walked to the door anyway. Something in me wouldn't let it go. Could have been curiosity, or maybe I was just so goddamn starved for company that I wanted there to be someone out there. I opened the door, and there he was. A kid in his early 20s. Maybe. He could have passed for a college student if he wasn't half frozen. His face was pale as paper, lips blue, eyes wide and glassy like he wasn't all there. Snow clung to his coat in heavy clumps, and he was shaking so hard his teeth were clacking together. "God," I said, before I even thought about it. He didn't answer, didn't even look at me, just stood there trembling in the doorway, like he didn't know where he was. I should have hesitated, should have asked what he was doing out in a blizzard, who he was, how he got up here. But I didn't. If I closed the door and he died out there, I'd never be able to live with myself. That part of me, the part that used to be a husband, the part that could have been a father one day, it's still there somewhere, even if it's quieter now. "Come in," I said. "Come on, let's get you warm." He stepped inside without a word. The wind slammed the door shut behind him. He left a trail of melting snow behind him as I led him to the fire. His boots were soaked through. I had him sit on the old armchair by the hearth while I threw a couple logs on and got the flames high. I asked if he was hurt. He didn't answer. "Can you talk?" I tried again. "Tell me your name." Still nothing. Just that 1,000-yard stare. Like he was looking through the fire. Past it. Like he saw something there I couldn't. He looked like hell. Skin pale and tight over the bone. Lips cracked. Nose bleeding just a little from the cold. I knelt down beside him to check for frostbite. And that's when I saw it. On his side, just below the ribs, his jacket torn and shirt soaked with blood, was a wound. A deep bite. Ragged, raw, and already turning dark around the edges. It wasn't new. A day old, maybe more. The skin around it was red and hot. "You didn't say you were bit," I muttered, more to myself than to him. He flinched when I touched it. First reaction I'd gotten out of him. His eyes snapped to mine, wild, just for a second. Then they went vacant again. It didn't look like a wolf bite. I've seen those before. Hell, I've seen worse. Back when I hunted more often. Wolves tear, rip, pull. This was cleaner. Too clean. I patched it up as best as I could. Cleaned it. Wrapped gauze tight around his ribs. He winced but didn't make a sound. Just watched me, breathing shallow. Like a cornered animal. After that, I set him up in the guest room. It had a bed, a thick blanket, and a space heater in the corner. He didn't say a word and just laid down, curled in on himself, eyes still wide open. I left him there, closed the door gently behind me. The cabin felt smaller after that. like he brought something in with him. A weight, a shift in the air. I tried to shake it. I made myself tea, sat by the fire, and held a book in my lap I didn't read. I checked on him an hour later. He was asleep, out cold. No fever, at least none I could feel. I left the door cracked just in case. I must have nodded off at some point. The fire was down to coals when I woke up. House quiet as the grave. I could hear the wind screaming against the windows. The old trees creaking out front, but nothing inside. No footsteps, no coughing, no movement from the guest room. I was just about to check again when I heard the floorboard creak. He was standing in the hall, just watching me. "Fuck," I said, nearly spilling my tea. He blinked slow, looked around like he wasn't sure where he was. "Sorry," he said, voice hoarse, dry. "Didn't mean to scare you." "It's all right," I said. "You're lucky to be alive. What the hell were you doing up here?" He scratched at his bandage. "Hiking," he said, "with my girlfriend Emma." I waited. "We were camping in the woods yesterday. No, a few nights before. Got caught in the storm. Thought we'd hunker down, ride it out." He stopped, his jaw tightened. "We heard something," he said, "outside the tent. I thought it was wolves, big ones. We stayed quiet, didn't move. But it didn't matter. They tore through the side." He swallowed hard, eyes wet now but not crying. "I ran. I didn't even see what they look like. Just teeth. It was wrong. Too many of them. Emma screamed and then..." His voice broke off. "You didn't see her after that?" He shook his head. "I ran until I couldn't. Then I saw your cabin." "You're safe now, kid. Just rest." He nodded, turned, and walked back to the guest room like he was sleepwalking. I tried going back to sleep, even poured myself another mug of cocoa, just to have something warm in my hands. But the air felt heavier now, like it was pressing in on me, 1 inch at a time. Sometime after midnight, I heard the floor creak. I glanced up, expecting to see him again, maybe wandering the hall confused. But there was no one, just the faint sound of the bathroom door clicking shut at the end of the hall. The light spilled out in a thin line under the frame. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. The pipes groaned once, a long, low exhale, like the cabin itself was holding its breath. Then I heard glass break. I walked to the bathroom and cleared my throat loud enough for him to hear. No response. "You all right in there?" Still nothing. Steam started seeping out from under the door, slow and crawling, hugging the floor like smoke. It looked off, not sharp and white like a shower usually gives off. This was thicker, heavier, gray around the edges, like breath fogged on glass. I stood outside for another minute, then stepped closer. I pressed my knuckles to the door and knocked once, gently. "You hear me, son?" Silence. Not even the shuffle of movement. No cough, no running water. The wood felt cold beneath my hand, not warm like it should be with steam coming through, just still and dead and cold. I leaned in, pressed my ear to the door, listened. Nothing. Every instinct in me said walk away. Let it be. The boy had been through hell. Maybe he needed time. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he just broke the mirror by accident. Maybe I was imagining things again. But my gut had gone cold. And it wasn't from the storm. I wrapped my hand around the knob. It was slick with condensation. I turned it slowly, quiet as I could, until the latch gave way with a soft click. Then, holding my breath, I gently opened the door. What I saw shook me. The kid was split open vertically down the middle, bisected with a horrific precision that ran from the crown of his head through his nose, mouth, and sternum, all the way down to his groin. The bathroom looked like a butcher's block, the tiled floor underneath stained with something dark and moist. His two halves rested on the floor like broken mannequins, separated by a sickening foot of space. Ribs, stark white and splintered, jutted like snapped fences. Muscles, still glistening and unnervingly pink, hung in strips. The coiled lengths of intestine and the dull, spilled organs lay exposed and motionless on the floor, some still clinging to one half of the body. There was an emptiness where his spine should have been, a hollowed-out canyon running through his core. It was as if something massive had forced its way out. From the inside, the precision of the split, through bone and gristle, was alien. Wrong. Then, through the haze of shock, a draft hit me. A bone-deep cold that had nothing to do with the storm outside. My eyes, still wide and unfocused, slowly tracked it. The small bathroom window, unusually sealed tight against the mountain air, was shattered. Not just cracked, but exploded outward, as if something had exited through it. Jagged shards of glass glittered on the sill and floor. The fierce wind howled through the gap, bringing with it a stinging spray of snow. And from the half of the young man's body that was closer to a window, a trail began. A glistening, repulsive path of black and dark red slime snaked across the pristine white tiles, past the gurgling toilet, over the shattered glass, and through the broken window frame, disappearing into the white void of the blizzard. I thought it was blood, but it was thick, viscous, and seemed to pulsate faintly in the dim light, leaving an oily sheen in its wake. Whatever had been inside him, whatever had ripped him apart and then fled, had left this horrifying signature. I finally found my breath. It was a cold, panicked gasp that tasted of iron and the strange stink coming off the floor. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the split halves, off the black and red trail that snaked across the tiles. Every instinct screamed run, not down the mountain. I'd never make it, but away from this room. It was out there now, something that hid inside a man, then discarded the skin to crawl through a broken window into a night that would kill anything normal. The thought of it sliding down the mountain, of it reaching the small defenseless town I'd just driven through days ago, made adrenaline surge through paralysis. It couldn't make it to town. Not on my watch. My feet moved before my brain gave the order. I didn't bother closing the bathroom door. The horror had already escaped. I moved past the living room, where the cozy glow of the dying fire felt like a cruel joke, and into the master bedroom. I went straight to the closet, tucked behind my winter gear. Right where I always kept it was a Remington 870. I pulled it out, the cold steel of the pump action a familiar weight in my hands. I grabbed the box of double-aught buckshot from the shelf, spilling a handful of crimson shells onto the carpet. But I didn't stop to pick them up. I loaded the shotgun quickly, the sharp, metallic sound of the shells cutting through the roar of the wind. It had been years since I'd pointed a gun at anything that wasn't a deer, but looking at the slick, dark trail leading out of my house, I knew this wasn't hunting a living being. This was stopping something that was already dead, something that had worn death, then shed it. I wasn't a hero. I was just a widower with a cabin, a shotgun, and a terrifying realization. I was the last line of defense. The storm that had trapped me had trapped it, too, on the mountain. I held the shotgun steady, my knuckles white. The wind howled outside, the trees creaked. I checked the hall one last time, glanced at the horror show of the bathroom, then moved toward the front door. There was no plan. There was only the gun in my hands, worry in my heart, and the knowledge that something sinister was crawling through the snow toward civilization. I flipped the deadbolt and hit the door with my shoulder. The wind was a physical blow, a sudden, blinding white sheet that stole my breath and stung my eyes. The roar of the storm swallowed the world around. It was a complete whiteout. My eyes searched frantically for the trail. The front porch was already buried under a fresh dirt, but I knelt down, shielding my face against the immediate sting of the snow. There it was, still outside the bathroom window on the other side of the perimeter. The oily black and crimson slime was already freezing, but it hadn't been buried yet. It was distinct, lying on the otherwise clean snow like spilled ink. It didn't just drip. It looked like something had slithered. I followed it, sinking immediately into the drifts up to my knees. The air was so cold it burned my lungs. I kept the Remington high. Its barrel was a dark, steady presence against the blinding white. The trail, glowing in width as I followed it, led past the woodpile and headed directly for the tree line. The trees themselves were black specters against the night, swaying and groaning under the weight of the snow. I fought against the resistance of the deep snow, pushing myself faster, driven by the metallic reek of the slime that, even in the freezing air, seemed to linger. I was maybe 20 yards from the cabin, battling a sudden, heavy gust, when I saw it. At first I thought it was a buck driven mad by the storm. It was easily that size, low to the ground, its dark shape barely discernible in the whirling vortex of snow where the cabin's clearing met the forest edge. But it didn't move like a deer. It didn't trot or bound. It scuttled. It was hunkered down, its massive body creating a brief moment of stillness in the blizzard, a small black shadow against the white fury. I stopped dead, sinking deeper into the drift. I raised the shotgun, pushing the safety off with a dry click. Through the shifting veil of snow, I strained to make out details, and the details I found were strange. It was hairy, thick black fur, matted and clotted. The fur was plastered down in clumps, matted thick with the same crimson slime that lined the floor of my bathroom. Its bulk seemed to be expanding, the hair giving it a immense, distorted volume, but the low, hunched posture suggested it was something that preferred to crawl. It had multiple limbs, too many, working in sync to move it along the ground, thick, jointed appendages that glistened unnervingly. The sight was a sickening contradiction. The heavy, dense covering of fur mixed with the raw, unnatural sheen of the slime. It looked like a living, wet wound covered in an animal's coat. Then it lifted something. Its head. I realized with a shudder of pure dread. It was impossibly large and angular, but I couldn't discern a face. Then the wind cleared the snow just enough for me to see a flash of wet, sickly red where eyes or a mouth should have been, reflecting the distant, faint light from my cabin window. It didn't see me. It seemed focused entirely on the darkness of the tree line, already beginning to merge with the shadows. It was moving, still low and fast, dragging its huge, repulsive body away from the cabin and toward the mountain pass that led to town. I gripped the shotgun, ignoring the trembling of my own body. The blizzard made the shot difficult, but the distance was short. If I let it reach the shelter of the trees, it would be gone. I took the slack out of the trigger. There was no hesitation left in me, just the immediate, primal need to stop this monstrosity before it vanished. I I squeezed the trigger. The sound of the Remington going off was deafening, a violent boom that shattered the stillness of the storm. The flash of the muzzle momentarily burned the image of the creature into my retina. I felt the powerful kick of the shotgun against my shoulder, and a split second later, the buckshot slammed into the creature's massive torso. It didn't go down. Instead, the thing let out a sound that cut right through the howling wind, a screaming wail that was entirely inorganic, like tearing metal on a wet, ripping canvas. It was a noise of pain, but also of inhuman rage, and it sent a spike of pure terror through my chest. The section of its body where the shot hit seemed to absorb the impact, scattering a spray of the thick, dark slime and a few clumps of matted hair into the air. It scrambled, the monstrous body, for all its bulk, moved with terrifying speed, abandoning the relatively clear ground and lunging into the dense black of the tree line. I pumped the action, ejecting the spent shell and loading a fresh round. Clack, chunk. I didn't wait to see if it was mortally wounded. I just knew I had to keep it moving, keep it from burrowing down or reaching the pass. I plunged into the forest after it, following the fresh, dark disturbance in the snow. The trees offered a brief, deceptive shield from the worst of the wind, but the snow was deeper here, making every step a labor. I focused only on the trail, the churned snow, the scattered slime, the deep, heavy indentations of its multiple limbs. I ran until my lungs burned, until the cold made the skin on my face ache, until the sounds of its desperate, laborious breathing were drowned out by my own. Then I stopped. The trail vanished. One moment I was following a distinct line of destruction. The next, the snow was pristine, only marked by my own clumsy boot prints. I moved forward a few more steps, scanning the blizzard-shrouded ground, wondering if the heavy snow had worked against me and buried the signs, but no, the trail had slowly faded. It had ended completely, as if the creature had simply dissolved into the air. I rotated slowly, the shotgun trembling slightly in my grip, my eyes uselessly searching the area around me. My breath hitched. I caught it only as an indistinct smear of shadow, a sudden movement in my peripheral vision. High above me, I tilted my head back, staring up into the shifting, wind-whipped canopy of the pines. There was no ground trail because the trail had continued up. The dark, oily slime wasn't on the snow anymore. It was smeared high on the bark of the nearest trees, running in sickening, vertical streaks. The monster hadn't been slowed. It had simply used the vertical space the forest offered. It had the high ground. It was above, hidden by the night, and the dense pine needles, and I was exposed beneath it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had gone from the hunter to the obvious, slow-moving target. I scanned the dark trunks of the nearest pines, searching for any break, any shelter that might afford me a moment of cover. About 10 feet away, a massive, ancient pine had been partially uprooted long ago, its gnarled root system exposed. The dirt and thick, woody roots had formed a dark, protective cave against the elements. I dove toward it, dropping to my hands and knees in the snow. I wedged myself into the space beneath the largest root, pulling the shotgun close to my chest, my back pressed against the cold, frozen earth. I held perfectly still, straining my ears against the wind, forcing myself to shrink into the shadows and the earth. It was silent again, save for the storm. The vast, black space between the high branches and the low earth was now where the true danger lay. I looked up through an opening in the uplifted roots, seeing only the tangled darkness. I waited for a drop of slime, a tremor of a branch, or the silent, horrifying moment when the massive, hairy, glistening shape would descend. I stayed perfectly still, trying to slow the panicked rush of my breath. The silence, punctuated only by the wind, was unbearable. The creature was somewhere above, hunting for the man that had just fired the loud, disruptive weapon. Then the snow began to sift down, not from the storm, but from the branches above. Chunks fell, followed by a sudden, heavy thud just yards away. It had dropped. The creature was on the ground again, but now it wasn't scrambling away. It was waddling, a fast, deliberate, low-to-the-earth movement, like a massive, glistening insect trying to appear harmless. Its bulk seemed even more immense, now that it was no longer distorted by the heights, and I could hear the wet, squelching sound of its many appendages on the snow. It moved slowly into the small clearing around my hiding spot. I was pressed so tightly against the frozen roots that the wood dug painfully into my spine, but I didn't dare flinch. I had already positioned the Remington. My shooting hand gripped the trigger. The barrel angled slightly up and out toward the opening of the root cave, resting against the snow-covered ground. The creature's movement was erratic, darting toward the tree line one moment, then pulling back. Why hasn't it found me? Then I realized it wasn't looking for me. Its massive, misshapen head was constantly sniffing the air, lifting and twisting with jerky movements. The air was thick with the howling blizzard and the scent of damp pine and frozen earth. The storm was masking my scent. The wind and the heavy, blowing snow were scattering and nullifying my presence, covering the fresh trace of gunpowder and adrenaline. I was lucky. The storm had become my unintentional ally. After a few minutes, the sniffing paid off, the waddling ceased, and its massive, slimy, hairy form turned directly toward my root cave. It approached the gap between the thick roots, filling the dark space with its bulk. It was so close I could feel the minute vibrations of its weight disturbing the ground. And then, its head lowered. The snow cleared just long enough for me to see the details I hadn't been able to discern in the blizzard. Its head was roughly the size of a buck or moose skull, but hideously wrong. The bone structure was too broad, too blunt. It had no discernible eyes, just wide swaths of slick, wet flesh the color of old blood. It wasn't just fur that covered it. Its thick, dark hair was matted with the slime, forming a repulsive, heavy mane. Interspersed within this mane was a horrifying number of short, glistening, leech-like appendages that writhed slightly in the cold air, tasting and searching. Then, it was inches from my face. I could smell the metallic stench of the black slime mixed with the sour, coppery odor of raw meat. I was looking into the mouth of the nightmare that had walked out of a man. One of the slick, worm-like appendages darted out, brushing against the tip of my nose. In that instant, it knew. The thing recoiled slightly, its large, blunt head drawing back, the wet flesh of its face tightening into an expression of immediate, primal recognition. The meal was found, the obstacle identified. It was about to strike. I didn't let it. I drove the barrel of the Remington up and sideways, the muzzle nearly touching the side of its monstrous head. The blast was muffled and wet, an awful, contained thunder. The buckshot tore into the creature's skull from below and the thing erupted, a horrifying geyser of black slime, wet fur, and bone fragments sprayed into the roots above me. The creature shuddered once, a massive, muscular tremor, before its great weight collapsed. It didn't fall on me, thankfully, but it landed directly outside my hiding spot, its massive body completely blocking the entrance. I lowered the shotgun, the noise of the ringing in my ears louder than the wind. I was trapped beneath a mountain of steaming, reeking horror. The ringing in my ears faded slowly, replaced by the sickening sound of hot, wet matter sizzling on frozen snow. I was entombed. The creature's immense cooling mass was pressed up against the root system, sealing the entrance to my makeshift bunker. I could hear the wind now, muffled by the sheer volume of dead, hairy flesh. I lowered the hammer on the shotgun slowly, my entire body shaking with a delayed, violent reaction. The smell was overwhelming now, a blast of copper, sulfur, and the sour stink of the creature's slime. The muzzle of the Remington was coated in gore. I had to get out. If the blizzard kept up, I'd be trapped here beneath a rotting carcass until the spring melt. I shoved the shotgun's barrel against the creature's flank, testing the weight. No movement. It was like pushing a felled, waterlogged oak tree. I shifted my weight, reaching with my free hand, and finally found the edge of the root that had protected me. I pressed my shoulder against the dirt wall and pushed, straining. The corpse moved an inch, then sank back. I had to try a different way. I turned the shotgun around and used the thick, heavy butt of the stock to scrape away the dirt and packed snow behind me, burrowing deeper into the root system. The ground was hard and frozen, but the shotgun butt gave me just enough leverage to widen a small, cramped gap between two lateral roots. Gasping, I barely squeezed through the opening. I emerged on the far side of the massive pine, away from the creature's bulk. I stood up slowly, my heartbeat pounding in my temples, and walked back over to look at the kill. It lay motionless, its multi-limbed body contorted awkwardly on the snow, but something was wrong. Where the head had been, there was only a ruin of black fur and pulped bone, yet a thin, milky white steam was rising from the wound, and then I noticed the blood, or lack of it. It wasn't bleeding out. The dark, black-red slime was only slowly oozing, congealing almost immediately in the bitter cold. The buckshot had caused massive trauma, but the creature's internal volume seemed insufficient for its size. It felt like I had shot a sack of thick fluid rather than a complex biological organism. My eyes caught something on the creature's massive flank. Where the first blast of buckshot had hit, the matted fur had been stripped clean, revealing the skin beneath. It was pale, slick, and thin, stretched tight over the enormous frame. The skin was visibly healing, slowly knitting itself back together. The gaping holes from the shot were shrinking, the raw, pink-red tissue pulling toward a center point. It was a terrifying, impossible regeneration. The steam wasn't from cooling blood. It was from a burning internal process. My breath hitched. The entire premise of this battle, that a shotgun could stop it, was a lie. I had maybe 10 minutes before it was functional again. I had to get back to the cabin, not just for ammunition, but for something heavier, something more final. I turned and ran like a madman, the snow swallowing my footing, the low branches whipping my face. The familiar trek back to the cabin was a blur of white and black, driven by the cold fear that the monster would simply stand up behind me. I burst through the door, slamming it shut and throwing the deadbolt. Though I knew a simple piece of metal wouldn't hold that bulk for long, I raced past the silent horror of the bathroom and into the storage closet. I didn't grab the deer rifle. A bullet was a coin toss, but fire was a guarantee. Tucked behind the winter tires were 2 red 5-gallon jerry cans, one for the snowmobile, one for the backup generator. I grabbed a can of kerosene too. It would burn slower and hotter than gasoline, and yanked it out. Next, I needed a wick. I dove into the kitchen, grabbing the thickest rag I could find, a towel used for drying dishes, and stuffed it into my pocket. The light was my last stop. I opened the kitchen drawer and snatched a long, thin butane lighter, used for starting the pilot light. I was ready, but not fast enough. The quiet, heavy silence I'd endured for the past few minutes was broken by a sound I'd only heard when cutting down trees. A slow, heavy, ripping sound coming from the side of the cabin. The side where the bathroom window was. It had found its way back. The hole it had created to exit the young man's body wasn't large enough for its current monstrous size, and it was trying to climb through the window. It was tearing the wall apart. I could hear the sickening crunch of frozen pine breaking and the sound of thick wood snapping. I had to assume it was fully healed, or close enough to it. The storm, which had given me cover, now threatened to bury me inside of my own cabin if I wasn't careful. I had to take the fire to the monster. I yanked the door open, the kerosene can heavy and cold in my hands, and plunged back out into the blizzard. The creature wasn't at the door. I rounded the corner of the cabin, the heavy kerosene sloshing, and saw the damage. A huge section of the wall near the bathroom was ruined, wood splintered, and insulation streaming out like cotton guts. The creature was there, its massive, steaming head pulled back from the shredded wall. It saw me instantly. The bluff of the blizzard had been called. I was standing in the open, and it was less than 20 feet away. It began its repulsive, slow waddle towards me. Its limbs churned the snow. The black slime glistened. Its regenerating head tilted low. It was honed in on me. I dropped to a knee, pulling the heavy can close. I twisted the plastic cap off, then tore the towel from my pocket, shoving one end into the neck of the can to soak. The stench of the oil and the creature's musk mingled horribly in the cold air. The monster was 10 feet away. I didn't try to aim. I just tipped the heavy can and began to drench the path between us as I walked backwards. I emptied half the 5 gallons in a wide, black arc right into the snow and across the creature's forelimbs. The kerosene didn't mix with the snow. It simply stained it, turning the white ground into a shimmering black slick. The creature didn't stop. It waddled right through the flammable pool, its greasy fur absorbing the oil. As the beast closed the distance, close enough now that I could feel the steam emanating off its bulk, I pulled the soaked towel out, threw the can aside, and flicked the butane lighter. The thin blue flame fought the wind for a fraction of a second, then held. With a final, desperate roar to myself, I lit the kerosene-soaked rag like a torch and threw it directly at the monster. It hit the creature's torso, and the effect was instantaneous and brutal. The oil-soaked fur and the slick, saturated snow trail ignited with a violent whoosh. The flames were furious, a shocking blast of orange and red against the white snow. The creature was engulfed in a terrible, screaming pillar of fire. The kerosene and the creature's own slick, greasy essence fed the flames instantly, making them burn with a blinding, hot intensity. The monster shrieked, a sound of agony and pure animal terror, and began to thrash violently in the fire. It wasn't waddling anymore. It was rolling in the snow, trying to beat out the inferno. Fortunately for me, the flame stuck to its oiled coat like glue. It was a chaotic, burning silhouette against the backdrop of the swirling blizzard. The thick, black smoke was lost immediately in the swirling white. I backed away. The heat of the fire was shocking contrast to the bitter cold. I watched the creature convulse, unable to stop the burning, unable to heal what was being systematically destroyed. The smell of burning hair, oil, and something metallic sweet was nauseating. Finally, after a minute that felt like an hour, the thrashing stopped. The creature lay still, a massive, charred monument to my desperate resolve. The fire still raged, but the movement was gone. I leaned against the icy wood of the cabin, the shotgun forgotten at my feet. The flames were already starting to melt a ring of snow around the body, but the blizzard continued to rage. The intense heat from the burning carcass was already beginning to recede, fighting a losing battle against the continuous onslaught of the blizzard. I stood for a moment, letting the sheer exhaustion wash over me, before the pragmaticism and determination of the mountain man kicked in. The fire was dying, and what was left of this thing couldn't be allowed to heal, or even to rot here. I grabbed the heavy kerosene can and emptied the rest of its contents onto the smoldering pile, coaxing the flames back into a furious, consuming roar. I moved the equipment inside, then returned to the blazing carcass with my axe. It took a sickening 15 minutes of hacking and separating what little was left of the creature's bulk. I dragged the black, escaping chunks through the snow and tossed them back into the heart of the blaze. The air was thick with the stench of oil and the sweet, terrible smell of burning meat. I was purging the mountain of this evil. When I was done, only a patch of melted snow and a few glowing embers remained. I stood over the pyre, the axe handle cold in my numb hands, watching the last of the embers fade into the furious white. I turned, intending to head back inside, lock the doors, and face the grim reality of the split body in the bathroom. That's when I heard it. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the groan of a tree. It was a faint, wet, screaming wail, identical to the sound the creature had made when the buckshot first hit it, the sound of ripping canvas and tearing metal. It came from the same direction as the first time, from the depths of the tree line, from where the young man had come. I spun around, bringing the axe up like a shield, searching the blinding, swirling storm. My mind immediately went to the rifle, the thing I had left behind in the house in my haste. I had nothing but a bloody, snow-covered axe and a dead fire. The wail came again, closer this time, high-pitched and choked. I took a step backward, preparing to fight, when a memory finally pierced the fog of panic. The young man's vacant eyes, the young man's story. Hiking with my girlfriend, Emma. Fuck. Like the title states, anytime I buy something, I always read the reviews beforehand. It's the only way to know if it's any good. But as the enshittification of the internet progresses, these reviews are becoming less and less helpful. I mean, how honest are they going to be for a product called Rhea Bio Collagen Real Deep Mask, Hydrogel Overnight Mask, Korean skincare, stocking stuffers for girlfriend and wife? Like 0%. They're all botted to hell. Regardless, I do it anyways. I mean, there's gotta be some real people reviewing this junk. It's better than buying something with 0 reviews, or a bunch of negative ones. To preface this, I just moved into my first apartment last week. It's a bit scary knowing that I'm broke and only have the absolute basics. TV, entertainment stand, couch, bed, etc., etc. But oh well, it is what it is. I'll just buy a little at a time until it's fully furnished and looking gorgeous. My goal is to eventually work my way up to the ultimate luxury, an espresso maker. First order of business is getting a toaster. Yes, a toaster. Call me weird, but I love toast. I've been eating it almost every day for breakfast since I was a kid. Any toast aficionado knows that the best way is butter only. No jam or jelly or anything weird like Marmite. So, yes, a toaster will be my first treat of many. I start looking on Amazon and, almost immediately, find a cheap toaster with somewhat decent reviews. 4.3 stars with 8K reviews isn't bad. Let's see what people are saying. Great toaster if you need something basic. 25 bucks and it works. Doug MacArthur. It toasts, lol. Secret_broil. Fantastic little appliance. Perfect for breakfast. Jeremy M. Good enough for me. I'll go ahead and get it. Should only be a few days until it arrives. Sure enough, a few days later, I get home from work and my package has arrived. Call me a nerd, but I am so excited for this thing. I might even have me a little late night toast excursion. I set the toaster up and, what do you know? It doesn't work. I plugged it in, put my bread in, pulled the handle down, and nothing. What a piece of crap. At least Amazon has a good return policy. That night, as I start the return process and begin looking for a new toaster, the busted one starts making a clicking sound. I'm talking loud too. Just click, 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 click. Drove me nuts for a few minutes until I unplugged the thing. What's weird is that it was hot, and the lever wasn't pulled down either. But that's what you get for ordering some crap that was probably made for $2. I finally find a new one, something pretty similar, and at this point, I'm pretty irritated. So I don't even check the reviews this time. I just click buy, put my phone on the charger, brush my teeth, take off my makeup, and go to bed. As expected, another few days roll by and I'm chilling on the couch when there's a single knock on my door. I open it and voila, new toaster. I still have to return the old one, but I'll do it later. I have 30 days. It's not like the one I have is haunted or anything. A week goes by and thankfully, I finally have my third day off since moving in. At least this time it is paying off. As I sit in my bed rotting, aka watching TikToks and eating chips all day, I look around and notice how bland my bedroom is. I mean, it looks like a dude's room. I need to get some color or something in here. Maybe an accent wall would be nice. So I go on Home Depot's website and look at paint. Exciting, I know. And I'm thinking a nice pop of ocean blue would be perfect. But I don't want to get some crap where the paint flakes off. So I find a brand and color I like. And of course I read the reviews. Beautiful color. Was exactly what I was looking for. The cottage has never looked better. Mary. Went on beautifully. Color was better than I expected too. Perfect for when you just need to liven a dreary room. Jeremy M. It's paint, what do you expect? Home Depot customer. Alright, well, Home Depot customer sounds like a bit of an asshole. But I think I'll go with this one. I order it and... a week? It's going to take a week? That's some BS, but whatever, I guess. In the meantime, maybe I'll go on Etsy and get some cute new earrings too. I mean, I can't let my apartment's soon-to-be prettiness show me up. Again, I hear the clicking of the toaster. Click, 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 click. I go to the kitchen and it's plugged in. And it's hot. Almost unbearably so. How the hell is that possible? Something is weird here. I could have sworn that I unplugged it. I need to return this thing tomorrow. Regardless, I go back to my room and hop on Etsy. After only a few minutes, I find the most adorable little silver snake earrings. I mean, they aren't everyone's cup of tea, but apparently I like reptiles in mine. Now I bet you'll guess what's coming next. Cue drum roll. The reviews. Got them for a friend's birthday. She loves them. Kirsten. Talk about quality. I've been buying from Sam Slithers for a few years now, and they've never disappointed. 6 stars if I could. Goose Gobbler. Absolutely fantastic. Truly, I mean, why would you want your new apartment to be prettier than you? Jeremy M. What was that last comment? Who would say something like that? I look through my recent purchases on every website, and the same name keeps popping up. Jeremy M. Even with the second toaster I bought. He reviewed that. Great toaster, especially if the earlier one is on the fritz. The clicking drives me nuts. Jeremy M. This has to be some sort of messed up coincidence. Out of total paranoia, I start looking up random items. Paper towel holders, vacuums, baby gates. Great for your first apartment out of college. Jeremy M. If only it could vacuum by itself. Unfortunately, being a girl living alone, you have no choice but to do it yourself. Jeremy M. You'll never be able to use this, Jess. Why bother? Jeremy M. What the... Who is this? I go to the original review and click on Jeremy M.'s profile. They now have a profile picture and it's me, sleeping in bed, but the worst part is the bio. It's my address, and the date of time. 8:50 p.m. It's 8:49 p.m. It was a normal night like any other. I spent the day with my friend, getting our nails done before she left for England to visit her long-distance boyfriend. I saw some friends and hung out way too late, before one of them offered to drop me off at the train station so I wouldn't have to walk. This late at night, the station was a ghost town, with just a few people nursing bottles held in brown paper bags. I made my way into the desolate train station, looking for the correct platform, but there were so many. It looked like the station stretched off into the distance. There hadn't been that many platforms when I arrived earlier in the day. Had there? My anxiety really ramped up when the screens weren't working. They didn't show where the trains were going or coming from on any of the platforms. I brushed it off since I'm already an anxious person. I figured I was just confused, so I chose the platform I thought I came in on and asked a conductor of another train company if I was on the right platform. He said I was, but my train was unusually late. He told me to go to the other platform across the way if my train didn't show up in 10 minutes before its departure time. A few minutes after that train left, my train arrived. The doors opened, so I figured I could go and sit down early before anyone else showed up. It struck me as odd I didn't see anyone leave the train, but I just figured nobody was in this particular train car coming out this specific door. Too late for anyone working, too early for anyone to be coming home from the bars. I had made my way up the stairs to the second level, sat down next to one of the screens, hoping it would tell me where I am in my journey, but it was blue screened with the words, "He's dead, Jim," scrawled across the screen, along with some other font that was too small for me to read without my glasses. It was weird, but I thought I could just listen to the loudspeaker and actually pay attention to figure out where I was. My phone had no service underground in the subway, so it was just an expensive paperweight at that point. The train began moving, but the voice over the speaker was wrong. Demonic, one might say, full of random beeps and blips. I brushed the worry off and started looking out the window, watching for the station signs to start passing us by. None did. It was all just a blur of darkness outside the window. I heard the speaker come on again. Unintelligible noise assaulted my eardrums before the transmission ended in a hiss that sent chills down my spine. I could hear someone laughing in the distance, but it sounded wrong. Rather than being full of mirth, it sounded panicked, the way someone laughs when they're nervous. This was when I began to truly realize that something was off. I looked around, trying to catch a glimpse of the other passengers, mostly to see if any of them looked as freaked out as I felt. The train car was mostly empty at that moment, but I could see a woman with tears streaming down her face while she smiled. A man was staring very intently at the wall. Rivulets of something dark slowly dripped down the back of his neck from under his baseball cap. It was in that moment I knew I messed up. A girl walked by me. Long black hair completely covered her face, and she wasn't wearing any shoes. She trailed thick black streaks with each step she took. More people had started filling in at that point, but we hadn't made any stops yet. I didn't know where they were coming from. A man walked in and sat down across from me. His eyes were practically glued to his phone, but when he didn't look up to see the passengers around us, he startled. A pitiful squeak escaped his lips, causing everyone else in the train car to turn towards him. He was staring at someone down the train who I couldn't see. As panicked sobs started to escape his lips, he managed to croak out, "Her eyes. What is wrong with her eyes?" I didn't know what to do. I simply made eye contact with him and tried to slyly shake my head, to tell him not to draw attention to us. The passengers didn't stop staring at him until a conductor with a strong stench of decay and burning plastic showed up and led him away. He didn't fight it, just let the conductor drag him away while seemingly frozen in fear. So now I'm sitting here, trying to control my face and not let on that I shouldn't be here. I can hear voices further down the train, almost like stage whispers that I can't quite make out. There have to be other normal people on this train. There's plenty that look normal, but they all seem unfazed by what's going on around us. I'm scared, and now that I'm on the train, I don't think it's taking me home.